Hi class, this is the presentation for Chapter 2, which covers descriptive statistics. So in this chapter, we start with frequency distributions and their graphs. So first of all, what is a frequency distribution? So a frequency distribution is a table that shows classes or intervals of the data with a count of each of the number of entries in each class. And the frequency of a class is the number of data entries in that class. So let's look at this table and what does this mean? So the first class includes 1 through 5. The second class includes 6 through 10. The third class includes 11 through 15, then 16 through 20, 21 through 25, and 26 through 30. So what this means is that my data values go from number 1 to 30. So the only values that data can take is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on, up to 30. The data can take on any number between 1 and 30. And then this frequency is a count. So it's a count of the numbers of ones, plus the numbers of twos, plus the number of threes, plus the number of fours, plus the number of fives, and that total is 5. Okay, so that doesn't mean there's 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. There could be 0 ones, 0 twos, and 5 threes, 0 fours, and 0 fives. Okay, so it just means that when I count all of the ones, all of the twos, all of the threes, all of the fours, and all of the fives, I get 5 total. And the same thing here. When I count the number of 6, 7s, 8, 9s, and 10s, I get 8. When I count the numbers of 11, 12, 13, 14s, and 15s, I get 6. When I count the number of values that are 16, 17, 18, 19, or 20, I get 8. When I count the number of 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25, I get 5. And when I count the number of 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30, I get 4. And then the class width is the difference between consecutive classes. So this is my lower class limit is 1, and my upper class limit is 5, meaning this class contains all the values between 1 and 5. My next class starts at 1 plus where this one ends. So they don't overlap. So notice that if this one goes from 1 to 5, then this one starts at 6. And my class width is the difference between these two. It's not the difference between 1 and 5. It's the difference between 1 and 6. So it's the difference between consecutive upper limits or consecutive lower limits. So 6 minus 1 is 5, 10 minus 5 is 5. And then all of these have the same width. So 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 5 is 11, plus 5, okay? And the same thing with the upper class limits. 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 5 is 15, and so on. And then my next class, the lower limit of this class will always be the upper limit of the previous class plus 1. So first class, so the way that we set this up in a table, we would start with our minimum value in our data set, and that goes here. So the lowest value, the numbers in the data would be between 0 and 30, or sorry, 1 and 30. So this number starts at 1. If it started at 5, this would be the minimum, so it would be 5. And then we take our class width and we add that to each of these. And then the upper class limit is basically this one less than this one. And then we add 5 to each of these, our class width to each of these. So how do we construct it? We start by deciding on the number of classes. And usually the number of classes will be between 5 and 20. Otherwise, it's really hard to detect any patterns. So if you make it too small, like if you only have 2 classes, you can't tell anything. And if you have more than 20 classes, you can't tell anything. And then we find our class width by first determining the range of the data. And the range of the data is the maximum value minus the minimum value. So again, the range of the data is the maximum value minus the minimum value. And then we divide the range by the number of classes. And then regardless of the number that we get, we're going to round up to the next convenient number. So again, if I divide this and I get 5.2, then I would round that up to 6, okay? And so my class width would be 6. Even if I get 5.013, I'm going to round that up to 6. And the reason is if you round down, okay, so if I go, okay, I got 5.1, so that rounds to 5, then your all of your data won't end up included when you calculate this table. So you would end up leaving some of the numbers out of the table. So we always round up. And I'm going to show you how to round up in Excel. Okay, and then after we know our class width, we'll find our class limits. So the minimum data entry is going to be the lower limit of the first class. And then we find all the remaining lower limits first. So once we have our class width and we know what our minimum value is, we just add that width and get all of these. So you want to be careful here because when you look at how my stat lab has you input this, they'll have you input this row. So they'll have you do the first class and then put in the frequency. So you want to create the entire table first, and then you're going to go into my stat lab and then just put the values from the table you created in there, because you can't create this row in a vacuum. You have to create this column, then you create this column, and then you count your frequencies. So you want to create the entire table first, and then basically you're just transposing that over into my stat lab. Okay. So once we have the class limits, we'll use the minimum data value as the lower limit of our first class, and then we'll find all the remaining lower limits. So we'll create that whole column of lower limits, column 1, and then we'll find the upper limit of the first class, which is going to be the lower limit of the second class minus 1, and then we'll get all the upper limits just by adding the class width to each of those. And then this says make a tally mark for each data entry, but what I recommend is we're going to, since we're using Excel, we're going to sort the data in Excel, and that makes it really easy to count the number that fall within each class. So then we're just going to count how many are in that class, and that is the frequency. So the frequency is just a count of the number in the class. And then we need to determine the midpoint of a class. So the way that we determine the midpoint of a class is we're going to take our lower class limit plus our upper class limit. Okay, so our lower class limit here is 59. Our upper class limit is 114. We're going to add those together and divide by 2. And that gives me the midpoint of this class. Okay, and then I'm going to take the next one and do the same thing. The lower limit plus the upper limit divided by 2. The lower limit plus the upper limit divided by 2. And that gives me the midpoint of the class. And the reason we want to use this is if they give us just a frequency table and not the actual data, and I want to calculate the average, I'm basically going to assume that all 5 of these values are 86.5. Because I don't know that one of these was 73 and one of these was 84 and one of these was 95, so that I can actually calculate the average. So I'm just going to assume that all of them are the midpoint. Right? And in this case, our class width is 56. So you notice 59. So we can calculate that because 59 plus 56 is 115 plus 56 is 171. Same thing here. 114 plus 56 plus 56. And it'll be the same for the midpoint. So once you calculate the first midpoint, you can calculate the second one by adding these two numbers and dividing by 2, or by just adding 56 to this midpoint. Okay, so the difference between the upper class limits, our lower class limits, is our class width of 56. The difference between the upper class limits is 56, and the difference between the midpoints is 56. And then we can calculate the relative frequency for a class. The relative frequency is the portion or percentage of the data that falls in a particular class. So to calculate the relative frequency, it's the class frequency divided by the total number of data points that we had, which is just the sum of all the frequencies. So if we sum up all the frequencies, that's our N. And this is confusing, this slide, because these do not sum to 30. This is only showing us part of the whole table. So the table is actually bigger. If they ever show us the whole table. Here's the whole table. Okay, so let me go down to the whole. So if we go down to this whole table, we can see here's that first part that they showed us. Here's the rest of it. So if this is the number of values that fall between 59 and 114. This is the number of values that fall between 115 and 170, and so on. So if I sum 5 plus 8 plus 6 plus 5 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3, that's 30. This is new notation, and I will try to always point out when you have new notation. If I ever forget to, please don't hesitate to ask me. So this is a standard mathematical notation, and this is a Greek letter. So this is the Greek letter. The Greek alphabet, just like the regular alphabet that we use, has both lowercase and uppercase letters in it. So this is the uppercase Greek sigma, and you might have seen it on fraternities or sorority houses before, but in math, sigma has it always has the same meaning, no matter in any math class. Sigma means summation. So this means the sum of the frequencies. So this sigma means the sum, and sometimes you'll see it with an I equals 1 to some number, and then F sub I. And what that means is this first one would be F1, F2, because this is the F for the first class, the second class, the third class, the fourth class, fifth class, sixth class, seventh class. So it sometimes it'll have this extra part of the notation. It'll say I equals 1 to 7, F sub I, and that would mean we're going to add F1 plus F2 plus F3 plus F4 plus F5 plus F6 plus F7, which is 5 plus 8 plus 6 plus 5 plus 2 plus 1 plus 3, and that adds to 30. And then again, the midpoint of the class is 59 plus 114 over 2. This one is 115 plus 170 over 2. So we calculate all of our midpoints, and then our relative frequency is F over N. So we take this frequency divided by the sum of all the frequencies. So that's where they're getting that. So up here, there are 5 in this class. So we take 5 over the total, which is 30, and we get 0.17. 8 over 30 is 0.27. 6 over 30 is 0.2. Okay, so that's where these relative frequencies came from. 5 over 30, 8 over 30, 6 over 30, 5 over 30, 2 over 30, 1 over 30, and 3 over 30. And if I sum up all of my relative frequencies, and so that's why it's written like this, the relative frequency is F over N. So if I sum all of these up, these will always sum to 1 because every value is included. So you can also think of this as what this tells me is 17% of the data lies in the first class. 27% of the data lies in the second class, and so on. So if I sum all of that up, I'm going to get 100% of the data, or 1. And then the cumulative frequency. The cumulative frequency, this is wrong. The cumulative frequency, this first one should be 5. So it's the sum of the frequency for that class and all previous classes. So the first one, it's just the number in this class, because this class plus all previous classes, there are no previous classes, so this one is just 5. That should be a 5. And then I go, the next one, the sum of this class plus all previous classes is 8 plus 5. 8 plus 5 is 13. I can also take, this should have been a 5. 5 plus 8 is 13. This one, the cumulative frequency is this one plus this one plus this one, 6 plus 8 plus 5. So if I take this 13 plus 6, then I get 19. So it just makes it a little easier to set up the table by once you have this first value, this should have been a 5. We go 5 plus 8 is 13. 13 plus 6 is 19. 19 plus, let's go down to the full one. 19 plus 5 is 24. 24 plus 2 is 26. 26 plus 1 is 27. 27 plus 3 is 30. Okay. We can also create a frequency histogram, which is a bar graph that represents the frequency of the distribution. And the horizontal scale is the quantitative measurements or the data values. So in the example here, these values are 1 through 30, but we're going to group them together. Okay, so this first bar would represent, sorry, these would be 59 to 450, my bad. So this first bar would represent the values 59 to 114. Okay, and then the height would be the frequency. So this height for this one, this first height would be 5. Sorry, this one, 5. The horizontal scale is the measure of the data values. The vertical scale is the frequency count, and the bars must touch. So when you go to graph this in Excel, it's going to put spaces in between these, and that's okay. So technically, they're not supposed to have spaces in between, because that makes it look like it went down to none, that there's a class in between these with nothing in it. But in this class, I accept it that way, okay? Because I don't want you guys to have to draw them by hand. So it's okay if there are spaces between your graphs, but technically there aren't supposed to be spaces. To get rid of the spaces, we can calculate class boundaries. So if you do this, this forces Excel to make these to match, because what Excel does is when you put in this first class is 59 to 114, then it puts a space in between. So the class boundaries, we create a class without forming gaps. So what we do to create these class boundaries is we take the lower bound of the class and we subtract 0.5. So we make that 58.5. We take the upper bound and we add 0.5. So we make that 114.5. So we just make the class a little bit wider, 0.5 lower on this side, 0.5 higher on this side. So when I do the next one, it would be, I would lower this by 0.5. So this one also becomes 114.5. And then this one becomes 170.5. And now there's no space between these when I use the class boundaries. So it looks like this. So now, again, the lower ones, we subtract 0.5 from each of the lower bounds. We add 0.5 to each of the upper bounds, subtract 0.5, add 0.5, and then there's no overlap, or sorry, no space between. Okay, so they go right up against each other. Another type of graph that we can make, in addition to a histogram, is we can make a frequency polygram. And a frequency polygon is a line graph that will show us the continuous change in frequencies. Okay, it starts at the lower bound of the data set, and there's no data below that, so that's why this starts at 0. And then these are the frequencies of each class, and then it goes to the upper bound. So this is the lower bound of the first class, the lower bound of the second class, and this uses the frequency that's in the first class, okay? This is the lower bound of the third one, and so on. So when we get to the top, we've included all of the data. A relative frequency histogram will have the exact same shape as the frequency histogram. So the bottom, the horizontal axis is the data values, just like it was with the histogram. But instead of putting our frequency counts here, we put our relative frequencies. And what happens, since in our example, this is in the frequency histogram, this is 5. And in the relative frequency histogram, this is 5 over 30. But since we're dividing all of the frequencies by 30, you could actually print these out, set them on top of each other, and they will look exactly the same. So they'll have exactly the same shape, because what we've done, instead of making this height, probably would go from 0 to 10, right? We're now making it go from 0 to what the highest percentage was. To 20%, but it's going to look exactly the same. Right, so we can set them on top of each other, and they'll look exactly the same. And then a cumulative frequency ogive, we just take the cumulative frequencies. So we start at the lower bound of the first class, and the cumulative frequency is 0. And then we put in the first cumulative frequency and the next one, and so on. And when we get to the end, the cumulative frequency will be the number of total data values we have. So in our example above, this cumulative frequency is 30. So it's a line graph that displays the cumulative frequency of each class at its upper class boundary. So to construct that, we would construct a frequency distribution that includes the frequency, the cumulative frequency as one of the columns. And then we would specify the horizontal and vertical axis scales. So it's cumulative frequency. So this, the vertical scale would go from 0 to 1. And then the horizontal would be based on the data values. And then we would plot the points that represent the upper class boundaries and their corresponding frequencies. And then we connect the points in order from left to right. And the graph should start at the lower boundary of the first class, where the cumulative frequency is 0 because there's no data below that. And it would end at the upper boundary of the last class. And the cumulative frequency there is equal to the number of data values we had, which is the sample size. Okay, I'm going to stop there and go out and show you guys how to do this in Excel. So going forward, I'm going to do one section at a time. So I will do the presentation followed by how we set this up in Excel. So let me open up Excel here and show you what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to put it kind of next to it. Okay, so what I recommend you do in Excel, we're going to use Excel extensively in this class. So if you are not proficient in Excel or comfortable using Excel, I recommend that you do some Excel tutorials and get more comfortable, because we use Excel a lot. But you can pause this video and go back and check things. The other thing that I strongly recommend is I'm going to set up examples for you. So I highly recommend that you do my example in your Excel spreadsheet. Make sure that your calculations are all working and you're getting all the same values that I got. And then you can troubleshoot and play with it and make sure everything's working. And then go in and create. So I recommend you have one that this is like your chapter 1 notes. And then you make another one that is your chapter 1 homework problems. So, so the way that we do this is, let me delete this and we can just recreate it. Okay, so if you double click this, you can name this. It would have said sheet 1, and I can name this whatever I want. So I can name this chapter 1 notes. Okay, and then I can go here, and this one would be chapter 2 notes. So all of your quizzes are open note, and so is your final exam. Or you could call this chapter 2 template. So I recommend that you put all of your notes in Excel so they're in one place. But I know some of you like to write it in a notebook, and that's fine. You'll just have 2 places that you're going. Okay, so what I want to do first is I am going to set up this problem that they did. We're going to set up this table. Okay, so we are going to set up our expanded frequency distribution using formulas and make this all match. All right, so let me see. This is chapter This is actually section 2.1. Well, I'll call it chapter 2. That's fine. So this is chapter 2 notes. And then we're going to start with section 2.1. Okay, and so we want to create an expanded frequency distribution. I might be able to copy this. I made that really big. So if I click the home button, I can change this, make it a little more normal. All right, so we're going to set up our expanded frequency distribution. So it starts with the class. So what you would generally have, I would usually have a minimum. So sometimes you'll start with data and get this, but what we need to create this is I need a minimum, I need a maximum, right? And then I guess I don't need that. I need my minimum value and I need my class. Okay, because once I have my minimum, it goes here, and then my class width, remember that to get the lower bounds for these, we're going to take our class width and we're going to add it here. So to create this table, my minimum data value would have been 59. And my class width was 56. Oh, and by the way, I highly recommend you get free copies of Office products. You get up to 5 that you can download to a device. And I highly recommend downloading Excel to your laptop or desktop that you're using to do your homework instead of using the online version. Because when you go to open it, you can also open it in a browser, but it looks different and it works differently. And I prefer the desktop version, so I'm always going to use the desktop version. And if you're using the online, the browser version, you might have to look up how to do some of the things that we do. It doesn't always work the same in the browser version. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware I'm using the desktop version. Okay, so once I have these two things, now I'm going to set up my table. So the first column is class. And go to their expanded table here. Okay, so it looks like this. Class, then frequency. Which is F. It's a little wider. And then we have our midpoint. And then we have our relative frequency. I'm just going to go like that, abbreviate. And then we have our cumulative frequency. And that's it. That's our whole expanded table. Okay. So then I'm going to put in the counts because they gave them to us. So, for the class, I'm going to split this up into 2 pieces. So I am going to insert, actually, I'm going to move this over because I want 2 pieces. So I'm going to go Control X, or actually, no, I want to insert because I already made these the width I want. So if I want to insert a column here, I can just go to this and I can right click. And then I can click insert and it'll put a column in there. I'm going to move these back over, Control X. This is good practice for you guys. And then Control V. And so what I want to do here is I want to have my lower class limit, okay, and then I need my upper. All right, and then we're gonna, when we put the classes in to our MyStatLab, you're gonna, your class, this value would be the 59, and this value would be the 114. Okay, so I'm gonna start here with my lower class limit. And this is where Excel really comes into play. So I like to, these are the pieces that I need in order to create this table. Okay, I need these pieces and I need the frequencies. So I like to mark these in red. So these are the things I need to put in. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to mark these in red. Okay, these are inputs. And then this whole table, this part is going to be a formula. So this first value is the minimum, which is 59. But I'm going to use the power of Excel and I want to pick that one. So I'm going to go equals. That tells Excel when I put an equal here that I'm using a formula. So I'm not typing in a number, but I'm using a formula and I want it to equal this. So I'm just going to click that. And that makes that 59. So I just click equal. And you can type in B4 or you can move your mouse and click on this. So once I hit the equal and I click on that, it'll put that into that cell. Okay. And then the next one is going to be 59 plus my class width. So this next one, I'm going to go equals. And instead of grabbing this though, I want to grab this. So it's going to be 59 plus my class width, which is 56. Okay, now the next one is going to be equals 115 plus my class width. But the big power of Excel, so you notice now I have 59, 115, 171. But the power of Excel is that you can copy the formula. But I want to show you what happens. If I copy this formula, which I can go Control C and then Control V, notice it did it wrong. Okay, because it went A9, showing me where that is, which is this value, plus this value. The reason it did that is it moved, when I copied this down, it moved this down one, and it also moved this down one. So the way that I avoid that happening is when I go into this formula, I'm going to anchor this. So the B is fine. I want to pull from column B, right? But I want to pull this 56 every time. So if I put a $sign in front of the 5, it'll keep this as row 5 when I copy the formula. If I put a $sign also in front of the B, it'll keep this also as column B. So you can add both of them if you want, because I know I only want to use the 56. So it doesn't matter, but I'm going to leave it like that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put a double $sign because then I can copy it sideways. So you guys will see why I did that in a minute. Okay, so I want to always pull this number. So I anchored this to this particular cell. I anchored it to column B and I also anchored it to row 5. So I anchored it to exactly this cell. So now I can copy sideways, I can copy down. It'll always use this 56. All right, so what I wanted to show you is now I can copy this down. So I can go Control C to copy, but I can grab this. You see the little square? I can grab that and just pull it down. And I'm going to pull it down further than I need to, just to show you. So now it's added. If I click, you'll see it's adding this number plus this number, the next one, the previous lower class limit plus 56, and so on. So now I have 59, 115, 171, 227. Let me move it over next to it so you can see. This is this first set of numbers here. So those are all matching up. And then I only needed to go to 395. So I'm just going to delete these. I'm just going to highlight and delete those. Okay. And then I need my first upper class limit. So the upper class limit is this second lower class limit minus 1. So I'm going to go equals. The reason I want to do this as formulas then all you have to do is put in these two numbers and this whole table will be generated for you. Okay, so I'm gonna go equals, and now it's this value, my lower class limit, minus 1. Okay, so now that one is 114, which is what I want here. And then I can take this formula and I'm just gonna copy it over. I'm gonna show you that that works. Okay, because now this one is 114 plus 56. Now I can copy that down. This one should be 114 plus 56 plus 56 plus 56. So when I click on any of these, you can see it's taking the previous number and adding 56. And voila, how cool. Now I have my lower class limits and my upper class limits. And again, so when you go to put these into my stat lab, you'll have to put in 59-114. So this goes in as one value, but I have the two numbers that I need to put into my table. Okay. And when you're putting these into my stat lab, it actually has you put in a whole row at once, but you can see how we want to calculate the whole thing. Now the frequencies were given to us: 5, 8, 6, 5, 2, 1, 3. Okay, and then down here, I have the sum of the frequencies. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate that here. I want to show you how to do that. So to get the totals, okay, so I'm going to just put in here sums over here so I know what this is. Okay, and I'm going to make that bold. I typed these in, so we're going to make this red because I entered those. Those were not something I calculated. All right, and then down here we have the sum. So the way that you do this in Excel is you can click this data and it'll give you a sum. It was there. Here it is. So if I click on formulas, you see this Autosum. If I click this, it'll choose these automatically. Okay, and so it sums that to 30. The other thing you can do is you can go equal sum. And now you see this, if I click the tab button, it'll pick this formula. So you have to put equal so it knows it's a formula, because if you just type sum, it'll think I'm typing text. So I go equal sum. If I click the tab, I can grab that sum and it says number 1 to number 2. So that just means I want to put in where I'm starting, and then I'm going to copy this down, pull it, just drag it like that. Or you can type these C8 colon C114. So it's telling you number 1, comma, number 2, and then just hit enter, or you can put that in parentheses and then hit enter. Okay, so I can do that either way. I can go equal sum, highlight it, or I can go to the formulas and just grab the auto sum and it'll sum that column. All right, and now I want my midpoints. So remember, my midpoint is, you can either do plus or equal to do this, but let me do equal, and then it's the lower class limit. Oh, let me grab the midpoint formula from over here, because you might want to have this in your spreadsheet for some reason. So I wanted to show you, I like to use my snipping tool. To find the snipping tool, if you just go into your search here and start typing snip, if I type snip, I'll find my snipping tool. Type snip. You see how the snipping tool comes up, and then you can just click open and it'll open up the snipping tool. Okay, so here's my snipping tool, and then I go new, and I can just highlight this and I can pull this right out of the slide and just go Control C. Okay, and then I can go into Excel, and I'm going to put this over here along with my notes. But this is the formula for midpoint. I'm going to make that a lot smaller. Oh, I'm so sorry. I realized you probably can't see my Excel very well. Let me expand this. It should help. Okay, that probably helped a lot. Unfortunately, it doesn't make this bigger, but now you can see inside. So let me go back to what I already showed you because you might not have been able to see it. Okay, so I typed in my minimum and I put in my class width because those were given. And then this I put in equals this value. This one is this value, sorry, this value plus I anchored this with my dollar signs. Okay, this value is 115 plus 56 and so on. And then here, this is the sum. If you double click, you can always see your formula. This is the sum of all of these values. Okay, now we're going to calculate our midpoint. And the formula for our midpoint is the lower class limit plus the upper class limit divided by 2. So that's going to be equals our lower class limit plus our upper class limit. And then since I want to divide this by 2, I need to put those in parentheses. If you don't put it in parentheses, you're not going to get the right number because it's this plus this whole thing. So put that in parentheses, divided by 2. Okay, and that gave me 86.5, and that matched. And then remember, there are 2 ways I can do this. So I can copy these formulas. Once I copy it like this, it'll calculate all of them. Okay, so this one is 115 plus 170 over 2 and so on. So I can do it this way. That's one way. The other way that I can do it is I can just copy this formula over. Control C, and I could put this formula here. That's going to give me the same answer. Okay, because all of these, remember, these also increase by 56. So you can do it either way. So you can either calculate these separately or just have them increase by the class width. And then my relative frequency, remember, let me go back and grab the formula. The relative frequency is just the frequency divided by the total frequencies, the sample size. But let's go ahead and grab the formula. Okay, and I'm going to put that up here as well. My notes. Okay, so my relative frequency is just my class frequency divided by my sample size. So that's equals my frequency divided by my sample size, which is this. And again, every time I need to use this same number, the 30. So I'm going to anchor that by adding a dollar sign. The dollar sign is my anchor. So I'm going to anchor that completely. Okay, and now I can copy this. And then I can also, this is the sum. So I can copy this over here and it'll sum these for me. Or you can click formulas and sum, and it'll sum. Or you can do equal sum and then choose this. So multiple ways that you can get that to be 1. So the relative frequency should always sum to 1. So you should always check that. Okay, so everything you notice, everything so far, I put in this, I put in these, everything else on this table is a formula. Right, and then my cumulative frequencies is the sum, or is the current frequency plus all previous frequencies. So let me go grab what that is. The cumulative frequency is the sum of the frequency for that class and all previous classes. Let's also put that note in Excel. I'm just going to put it in now. I'll move it around. Okay, I'm going to move this up. I'm going to move this up. And I'll leave this one here. So I just like to have all the formulas in Excel So if you're taking a quiz and they ask you what is the cumulative frequency, it's in your table somewhere, so you can grab that. So what that means is it is the, for this first one, it's just the frequency. So this one is just the 5, okay? Because that's the frequency for this class plus all previous classes, and all previous classes are 0. And then for the next one, it's 8 plus 5. So it's 8 plus 5. And now I can copy this. Okay, and this one is 6 plus 13. Okay, and then I add 5, and then I add 2, and then I add 1. And when I get to the bottom, this should be the number that I had, which is 30. So this number and this number should match. Right? These should sum to 1. These should match. Then you did it correctly. And that's the whole table. So that's how we create a frequency distribution table. So now when you go in to do your homework, if I go in here to Unit 1, Assignment 2 in my Stat Lab, and the first section 1 or 2.1 is numbers 1 through 5. So what we just did, you're able to do these first 5 problems. And one of these, maybe number 4, one of these is create a frequency table. So this one says create a frequency table, and they gave us data. So we've already set this up. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back over here to Excel, and then I'm going to go plus, and then I'm going to go Chapter 2, homework. Okay. And then I want to copy all of this. So I'm going to copy this whole thing. I'm going to go Control C, and I'm going to put this in as my Chapter 2 homework, and this is number 5. I'd like to know what number it is. All right, and I'm going to put it here. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try copying it again. Control C. Let me try again. Control V. Okay, so now it put in my whole frequency table that I just created. All right, all these formulas should still be intact. And so I'm going to delete this because we had it in our notes. So now I just need the minimum value and the class width, and then everything in this table will update. All right, so they gave us data this time. So what we're going to do with this, they say the data represent the time in minutes spent reading a political blog in a day. Construct a frequency distribution using 5 classes. In the table include the midpoints, relative frequencies, and cumulative frequencies. And then you're going to answer which class has the greatest frequency and which class has the least frequency. So what I'm going to do is I am going to click this to copy the table, and I'm going to don't copy it to Excel or it'll open a new Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. Okay, and then you go Control C so that you make sure you have it copied. Done. And then I'm going to put my data over here. Okay, so I'm just going to paste my data right here. I'm going to start here. Here's my data. All right. So here's my data. And then what I want to do is I'm going to sort it. So I'm going to just copy this. So I'm going to paste it again, and I'm going to call this one sorted data because I like to see them both. Okay. So I'm just going to, someone paste it one more time. I just did Control V again. So you notice it's the exact same thing. And then you're going to sort it. So you don't have to do this. You can just sort the original, but I wanted you to see that there's 2 things. And then we're going to go data and sort. So data, sort. And it asks, do I want to expand it? I don't. So I'm going to continue it with what I have. And then I want to sort. And, oh, it did too. Never mind. I only want to sort this one. So I want to sort this data. Let me try again. Data, sort. I do not want to. I want to continue with my current selection, and then I want to sort. Okay, I'm going to sort from smallest to largest. So I'm going to click OK. And notice the smallest value was 0, which only occurred once. 49 occurred twice or 3 times. See, so you can see now it just sorted the data. All right, so the reason I wanted to do that is it makes it a lot easier to get these because whenever we input these. So, and it also tells me here's my minimum. So once I've sorted my data, the minimum value is equal this, right? And then I need to calculate my class width. So it tells me that we want 5 classes. So let me add in here a column or a place to put in the classes. Okay, and they want 5. And I'm going to mark this also in red as I put that in. Right, so 5 classes. And I recommend, again, guys, do what I'm doing. So use my data. Let me put my data for you in the Teams chat. Okay. I think it'll come out white when you try to copy it. You might have to change it to black so you can see it when you put it in Excel. But there's my data is in the Teams chat, so you can grab it when you're setting this up. All right. So here's my, so my minimum is 0. My number of classes is 5. And then I need to calculate my class width. So remember, if we go back to the presentation, that the way that we calculate the class width is it is the range divided by the number of classes, rounded up. Let me find that. Should have been right near the beginning. Okay, frequency, class width, somewhere it said the class width. The class width is the range divided by the number of classes, rounded up. So let me copy this formula for you. And put that down here so I know. So this is how we find the class width. So in order to calculate the class width, I need the range. So let's add in also the range. And the range is the maximum minus the minimum. So this is going to be the, whoops, the maximum value. Actually, so what we can do here is let's use a formula. So the minimum, I didn't need to sort this. I could have just done it like this. The minimum, I can go equal min, and that'll give me the minimum value. So you can use either data set. I'm going to use the sorted just because you can also see what it is, right? So it'll say it's 0. And then for the range, it's the maximum minus the minimum. So I'm going to go equals max of the data set. which is going to be the 49. So I could just pick the bottom value, but this way, once you put the data in, you just need to make sure it's picking from all of your data. So the maximum is 49 minus the minimum. Since I have it here, I'm just going to use this one. Okay, so my range is 49. This is now a formula. I'm going to leave that, so you can do it either way. So the range is the maximum minus the minimum. So the range is 49. And then the class width is the range. It's going to be the range divided by the number of classes. So this equals the range divided by the number of classes. And it gives me this. And then I need to round up. So there's a formula for that in Excel. And so we go equals round, and you see the round up. So if I hit the tab button, I'm wrong. I see it. If I hit the down arrow, I can scroll down to round up. And then if I hit the tab button, it'll grab that for me. So I want to round up that whole thing, and you'll see it'll, oops. Oh, I have to tell it how many decimal places I want, and I want 0. So that rounds it up to 10. Okay, so again, round up the range divided by the class width, and I want 0 decimal places. All right, so now I have my class width. Now I have everything that I need to recreate this table using my data. Okay, so I don't need the data anymore. Everything that I need is right here. All right, and all of these things are formulas, except for this. This I input, oh, class width. I should have put it over here. I'm going to go Control X. Okay, and it's a formula. So, oh, I did Control X and just moved it here. So this is the range divided by the number of classes. Okay, and this is also a formula. Let me make that black. All right, so now all we had to put in was our data and our number of classes. Shoot. Wrong, let me fix that. Okay. When I cut it and pasted it, okay, let me just put this in as the formula. Equals round up, use my arrow and then hit the tab. And then it is the range divided by the number of classes and 0 decimal places. Let's do that. And now all my formulas are intact. I don't need this. Okay, and this is a formula. So I'm going to make this automatic. And then I'm going to make this also that right color. Okay, because the only thing I put in here was my data I added. Let me make this also. I'm going to make this red so I know that this is something I added in. So when you go to do your final exam, it's helpful because on the quizzes, you'll probably remember that you would put this in. Okay, so all I had to put in is the number of classes. So notice it did this for me. If my class width is 10, these increase by 10. So it goes 0, it starts at the minimum, 0, and then these increase by 10. This one is this number minus 1, and then these increase by 10. Now I need to change my frequencies. So these are wrong, okay? But everything else is correct. My midpoint is 0 plus 9 divided by 2, and then these increase by 10. And then this is also wrong, okay? So these are wrong because they're using the wrong frequencies. So all I need to do now is I need to update these frequencies. And notice when you go back and look at the data, figure out where it went. Okay, we had 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is 4 by 5, so there are 20 data points. All right, so we have 20 data points. So our N should be 20 here when we get done. So we need to replace all of these frequencies. So our first class goes from 0 to 9. So I've sorted my data, so this makes it easy. So I'm going to count the numbers of zeros, 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Oh, sorry, and 9s. 1, 2, 3, zeros through 9. Zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's what I'm counting. So I have 1, 0. I have 0, 1, 0, 2s. I have 1, 3. I have zeros, 4s. I have 1, 5. And then I have 0, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I have 3. So you can go like this. You can also mark these, like put a mark underneath so you know that this is one set. Some people like to just take these and highlight them in different colors so that they know if you go home and you just highlight this. I'm going to highlight this one yellow, and then maybe just leave this one not highlighted. The second class goes from 10 to 19. So you're going to count the number of 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s. And again, I have 1 10, 2 17s, 1 18s, 0 of everything else in that class. And then the next one is 20 through 29. I'm just going to highlight this as well. This is just an easy way to do it so I can see the classes. Right? This one's highlighted. This is another class. This is another class. This is the class of 30s. This is the class of 40s. Okay, so now I need to count. So to count these, I have 1, 2, 3. You can also go over here and go equal count. If it's big, this might be helpful. Count and then highlight this, and it'll count them for you, and that group has 3. And then I can go here and do the same thing, equal count, tab, and then count this group. And the same thing here. And count this group. And then I can count these. Obviously, this one is just 2. Okay. All right, so these are the numbers I need to put in. So my first group has 3. My second group has, and I needed to get rid of these last couple, right? This only goes up to 49, so I don't need these. I should have 5 classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and if I want to delete these rows completely, which I don't want to do because my data is here, but if I wanted to delete these rows completely, I can hit this and hit delete, but I don't want to do that. Like I said, my data is there. 3, the second class has 4 in it. The third class has 5. Count, the count is 5. The next one is 2. And the last one is 6. Okay. So again, that's these. So now I have my frequencies, and my frequencies sum to 20. That's the sum of these. They sum to 20. And my relative frequency does it automatically, and those sum to 1 as I expect. And my cumulative frequency should equal n. So we want to check that all of that is working. That tells me my formula is working. So now I can see that I just created my whole table. So now I need to go back over to my homework, and I'm going to just put this in one row at a time. Okay, so I'm just going to move this here somewhere so I can see it. Put it off here to the side. I need to put this in one whole row at a time. So my first class is 0 to 9, and my frequency is 3, and my midpoint is 4.5, and my relative frequency is 0.15, and my cumulative frequency is 3. Okay, and then you click check answer. All right, and then we'll just put in the next row, 10 to 19, and my relative frequency is 4, and my midpoint is 14.5, and my frequency is 4, my relative frequency is 0.2, and my cumulative frequency is 7. So we want to create the whole table first, and then you'll go in and put the answers in row by row. All right, so that's how you do those. And then I am going to stop this recording so you can, like I said, I always recommend set up your Excel spreadsheet using my problem. And now that you have my problem working, you can add another row with your data and then put that in. So I recommend that you always keep a template, okay? So you could make this your template from my homework and then even add one more. That's where you do yours. That way, when you go to take a quiz, you always have that template that you know is correct.